I'm Doug Frank, Vice Commander of American Legion Post 162 in Hillsdale, New Jersey. Today is January 15th, 2014, and we're going to have a conversation with Randy Drisgula about his service during the Viet Nam War.
Morning, Doug.
Why don't we start out with where you were born and tell us a little bit about your personal history, and then we'll get into the military.
Okay, all right. I was born in, July of 1941 in Rome, New York, which is pretty much the snow belt of New York State, and went through high school there, and graduated in 1959. A year after that, I worked in a mill. I was a wire worker in Rome Cable Corporation for a year because I didn't think I wanted to go to college. But after that, I had a talk with my dad. He said, "Fine, you want to go to college? You pay for the first year. I'll pay for the next 3." So we made a deal, and I went to Ricker College in Holton, Maine, which is way up in Aroostook County, which is potato country. And when I was about, I was a junior in 1963, and I had a couple of cousins, Bernie and Billy Granacki, who were Marines in the Second World War. One of them went in when he was 17, and the other was 16. And they both served in the Pacific. And I always remembered what they had done, how good they looked in their uniforms and that type of thing when I was a kid. And the Marines came on campus at Ricker College and wanted to give out tests for Marine PLC program, platoon leaders class. So I took the test and passed it. So that summer of '63, I spent 12 weeks in Quantico, and finished that grind up with 6 weeks in a Quonset hut and at Camp Upshur, and then the second 6 weeks we finished up at what they call Mainside in the Marine Corps base in Quantico. And while I was there, of course, we saw helicopters flying into the airfield, T-28s such as this guy here, same colors, same type of airplane, and I got the urge to fly, and took the aviation qualification test, passed that, and the most important part was I passed the physical, because not too many passed the aviation physical. And so I finished up there, and I graduated from Ricker College in 1964, and I was commissioned at the same time at graduation ceremonies, second lieutenant. My whites, the whole spirit, sword, the whites, the whole thing, you know. And then started flight training in Pensacola in August of 1964. And in the meantime, I had started dating my wife, Mary Jane Freeman, who was from Westwood, New Jersey. I met her at Ricker College, and we became engaged in September of that year, and I flew back in December of '64. We got married, so I'm close. I'm in my 50th year of being married. So yeah, thanks. So at that time, I was in flight training, and we were living in Avalon Beach, Florida, which was very close to Pensacola Bay. And our rent for the 3-bedroom ranch house was, I think, about $85 a month. And so continued flight training. I flew the T-34. And from there, after, I guess, probably a question?
That's not carrier. They don't do carrier training there as well with the Navy pilots? Because that's a Navy base.
I'm not there yet, but
okay.
At the, that's all right. The U.S. Naval Training Command, Aviation Training Command. And what they did, they trained Marines, Navy, and Coast Guard. And at one point while I was there, they were training Iranian pilots, which was surprising at this point. And so I flew the T-34, which was a smaller single engine, and then we transitioned, after about 40 or 50 hours, we transitioned into the T-28. And then after flying instruments, acrobatics, that type of thing, in August of 1965, I landed on the USS Lexington, catching the tail hook, catching the wire. We did 2 touch and goes, We were over the ship at 5:15 in the morning. I'll never forget it. We did 2 touch and goes and 6 traps, and it was one of the most exciting times of my entire life. So once we finished with that, then a couple weeks later we transitioned. Some Marines went to jets and Meridian. Of course, the Marine Corps wanted a lot of helicopter pilots, so most of us went into the helicopter training at Ellison Field, which was also in Pensacola. Okay, trained by Navy and Marine instructors. So after a few hours there, I guess we probably did another 100 hours there or so. And November of 1965, I got my wings of gold as a naval aviator in November of 1965. At that point, we took leave for a number of days, and then went to Jacksonville, North Carolina, and flew out of New River Marine Corps Air Station. And I was there for about 6 months flying the Sikorsky H-34, this guy here, and HMM 365, which was a Marine helicopter squadron.
Was that unique to the Marine Corps, or did the Army fly that helicopter?
The Army did not. The Army had flown it a little bit, but not as much as the Marine Corps did. Mm-hmm. No, they used the Chinook mainly for their troop transports, mm-hmm. and but the Army didn't fly that very much at all. The Army in Vietnam, Vietnamese Army was using these also, and they were basically in the late '60s. They were on their way out. But we flew that, and we trained in it in the States, and then when in June, took leave in June, and in July of 1966 is when we flew over to Okinawa. I think there were about 12 or 13 other Marine helicopter pilots we were all on the same orders, that type of thing. And we spent a week or so in Okinawa, and then went into Vietnam. We flew into Da Nang, and then we started working flying out of Marble Mountain Marine Corps helicopter base, which was right at China Beach, okay. Yeah, between what they called Monkey Mountain and Marble Mountain, okay, which was an actual mountain on the beach, which was marble. Okay.
What was your mission of your group in Vietnam?
Yeah, the basic mission was one of the most important missions we had was the medevac. We flew the H-34. We had a crew chief, a gunner, and a corpsman flew with us. And because it was so hot there, and the airplane wasn't that strong, we could only carry probably about 6 troops at the same time. So what we did with respect to the medevac, we just took that number of people, and we had a Huey gunship who flew chase in case we ran into problems. So what we would do is they would have a telephone system where the group would call up, and the telephone would go off, and they'd get 3 rings, bing, 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 and you knew it was a medevac. So co-pilot would run out to the aircraft, get it going, while the pilot stayed inside, got the mission information, got the coordinates, what was going on, and checked the information on the map, how to get there, how long it was going to take. And then by the time he got out to the aircraft, it was turning, and he hopped in. While I'm strapping in as the aircraft commander, the co-pilot's taxiing this thing out to the runway, and we're gone in less than 5 minutes. We're in the air, and I went to pick up the wounded. And usually not much farther from our area. Usually it wasn't much more than 10, 15 minutes to get out there, and then we'd make our arrangements, pop a smoke, and then we'd come down and pick somebody up. That type of thing. In addition to that, we flew resupply, ammunitions, troops, and recon insertions back in the mountains and in the jungles. That type of stuff. That stuff got kind of hairy once in a while. Of course, it all got hairy once in a while.
Well, that was still that was in the middle of the build-up, 66?
I would say pretty much. I remember when Hill 55, which wasn't too far away from Da Nang, is probably 10 miles, maybe 15 miles from the main part of Da Nang, which we were right next door to it, would take fire once in a while when I got there, and they were still taking fire when I left. Okay, and then during that time there were a number of operations that we were involved in, where we would, like say one time, I think it was Operation Prairie, when we were called out, and probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning for a big strike. We had no idea, that this was going to happen, but you got called out of bed at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and said, "Hey guys, you're going flying." And we got together with a number of squadrons, picked up Marines, I think it was up in Phu-Bai, and then took them into a landing zone for a strike force. Probably a battalion of Marines going back and forth, taking them in the, probably 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with a strike force. So we did that kind of stuff too.
Was that normal that you would be, most of the time you'd be flying along with other aircraft, or were there times when you would just be out by yourself?
Always had a wingman. Always had a wingman. You would never, basically never really went out alone. You always, because every once in a while you never know what was going to happen, and you needed that wingman to call for help or whatever the case may be, and and every once in a while somebody would go down. There were 9-cylinder engines, and every once in a while they'll give out on you.
So that was obviously not a jet power. Could you explain a little more detail, the armament that you had on board, as well as any protection, how it was constructed, how safe it was to fly in? Well,
it was a kind of a, they used to call it the dog. H-34 Delta was a dog. And as far as the armament goes, the front, the engine here was not protected. The only basic protection that we had as pilots were, we had the bullet bouncer, which was a 2-inch thick plate that we wore in front of us. Mm-hmm. And the pilot's seat and the co-pilot's seat, we had side steel armor, and underneath on the seat pan, and the crew chief also had metal under his seat pan. Okay, the crew also wore the bullet bouncer. And other than that, we had an M60 machine gun. The gunner had outside the left side window, the port side, and on the starboard side by the big window, the crew chief also had an M60 machine gun. That's basically all we had. The skin of the helicopter was magnesium, and no problem bullets getting through it. Okay, so there wasn't, as far as the machine itself went, there was no armament to protect the engine or the transmission. Yeah.
You mentioned you mentioned that you had some experiences in flying it that you could share with us.
Oh, right, yeah. And I mentioned previously that once in a while you don't know what's going to happen to the engine or the aircraft itself, because you always had somebody with you. And at one point we were, I just remember it like it was yesterday. Okay, and we were flying. Let's see, Skip Vielauer, and was in the other aircraft. He was number 1. I was -2 with John Baker, and we're flying mortars out to a hilltop called Nui Lak San, which was probably 30 miles southwest of Da Nang. And on the way there, my engine started to pop, make a bunch of noise, started to smoke, and our needles were going crazy with it, and it was obviously failing, and then it quit on me. Okay, so I told my wingman, I said a couple of expletives, and I said, I'm going down. And looked off to the right, because the pilot, aircraft commander, sits on the right-hand side. So when we came down, when I was flying it, we flew in a right-hand spiral. So looked off to the right, and there were a number of rice paddies down there right now. We usually flew about 1,500 feet. And of course, you got to remember, I had 800 pounds of mortars in the belly. So I'm heavy. But we spiraled down, and kept the RPMs up. You can fly it, although you're just basically you're guiding a rock on the way down, but you do have some control over the helicopter. And so things got real quiet when we shut the engine down, and we came on final, and probably about 100, 150 yards to the left of us, I could hear pop, 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 pop. So somebody was firing at us on the way down. And as I came through, set it down on the rice paddies with a fairly good speed. We didn't come to a crash. Okay, set it down with fairly good forward speed. There's these rice paddy dikes, which are probably 6, 8 feet wide, and they're probably 2, 3, 4 feet above the rice paddy itself. We mashed through one of those like a plow, and the mud came flying up over the windshield, and we stopped. Okay, so fortunately, of course, my wingman, Skip Vielauer, was loaded, so there wasn't much he could do. But there were 2 other helicopters that were on the same mission. They were on their way back. Okay, so what had happened was the crew chief and gunner took positions on the front of the helicopter and started spraying lead into the tree line, keeping heads down back there. I was in the helicopter trying to get the battery going so I could radio my wingman to come down, and they did. The other helicopters, the other flight came down, landed on our far side, so we were in between them and the tree line, and so we ran over, got in there, and they took us back to base. Interestingly enough, when we got back there, the operations duty officer, who was Russ Black, another lieutenant, and he said, Randy, he said, look, he said, we got a call from group, and it said somebody's going over the area. They're seeing some of the bad guys are going into your helicopter and starting to run into a helicopter, picking up boxes of mortar shells and trying to get away with them. Okay, and I said, well, I said the area is good. I said, but we were getting fire from the tree line. They said, well, I said what we're going to do is we're going to run a couple of A4s in there and take care of it. So that's what they did. They ran a couple of A4s in there, bombed it, and of course we lost the helicopter, but they took care of the mortars and whoever was trying to get them out of there. And
was that normal that they wouldn't be able to recover a helicopter that went down?
No, sometimes they had what they call a Sparrowhawk, which was for those emergent situations where they could take a couple of squads of Marines out and surround the area, get things quieted down, and then we'd bring a crew out with another engine. Okay, and you could spend our mechanics were so good that you could fly out there with another engine. They could drop the bad engine from the helicopter, put the new engine in. Okay, now this is a 9-cylinder big thing that was probably 6 feet in diameter, and change it in the field. And after a half a day, they could crank up the helicopter and fly it back. But the group didn't seem to think that it was such a good idea. While the mortars were out there, fire from the tree line, rather than put somebody in harm's way again. They took the helicopter down and blew it up.
Do you remember the value of that helicopter at the time you were flying?
Oh, gee, I have no idea. Yeah, but the interesting part was that Russ said, the operations duty officer back at this was probably around noontime, and Russ said, he said, oh, Randy, he said, look, he said, I hate to do this, he said, but go change and get lunch. He said, I got to send you back out. He said, I got no other pilots to go out. Everybody's working. So I had to fly over the same area on the same mission about 2 hours later, and I got to see the pock marks in the rice paddy where my helicopter used to be. Matter of fact, I took a picture of it. I don't have it with me, but I took a picture of it. You could see a couple of pieces of the blades, but basically bomb craters was all that was left of the bird. Yeah.
Were you in that one location, that one base, the whole time you were in Vietnam?
No, actually, there were some times when Dong Ha was way north of us, and it was right on the DMZ, and So there were a couple of times where we would go up to Dong Ha with maybe 4 or 6 helicopters to help them out up there, and so we might stay there for 3 or 4 days. We did the same thing possibly with Phu Bai, which is probably halfway up to Dong Ha. There was a helicopter squadron up there too. Once in a while, they would need help, and we might spend a couple of days up there, and then. But after we were there probably about 6 months, I would say, maybe 5 months. See, what they did with each helicopter squadron got the opportunity to transition and take all their pilots and crew and fly off to Okinawa for 5 or 6 weeks. They'd stay in Okinawa. It wasn't R&R. It was training new helicopters and crew to come over to Vietnam. Okay, so what we did, I think it was January of '67. We went to Okinawa, Fatima Air Base. In Okinawa, we got different helicopters that were there, and trained some new guys for a few weeks, and then from there we went on the USS Okinawa, which was a helicopter carrier. Okay, we left Fatima base in Okinawa and boarded the or flew aboard the USS Okinawa, okay, which we were going to be spending about 10 weeks on that. So on the way from Okinawa, we stopped in the Philippines. We were going to do a land operations with the Marines, do a landing, a practice landing or whatever for the Marines. We were there for about 3 or 4 days, and we were unable to do the practice landing because we got called up to come down to Vietnam. Okay, and so on the way to Vietnam, what we did, we practiced. We'd go out, we practice our landings, night landings, day landings, that type of stuff on the carrier, because when we were going to get to Vietnam, we were going to be operating off the carrier for a number of weeks. So we practiced and got our carrier qualifications in and got that all squared away. And when we got there, we were offshore probably at 10 miles, I guess, or whatever it was, 15 miles. And it was our job. We joined a number of other, I think there was another, let's see, we were on the Okinawa. There was USS Oriskany, I think, or Iwo Jima. I think it was the Iwo Jima. It was another helicopter carrier, and we were joining forces with them when we were taking the Marines in a number of battalions, and we were invading basically to clean out the DMZ. Okay, and we had never been there before, from my understanding. Okay, so it was a big strike force, and we flew in over the beach into the DMZ, landed maybe a mile or half a mile into the DMZ, and then the Marines were going to head westbound to clean things.
Bringing troops in?
We were bringing troops in. We had a battalion of Marines on board.
And how many would be able to be in one helicopter?
I'd say probably under the circumstances it was warm. It was hot there. It's tropical, that type of thing. So we couldn't get too much on board. So fully loaded Marines, we probably had 6 per helicopter. A lot of trips. Well, we had I think we had 24 helicopters on board, and so we were flying back and forth. Of course, we'd refuel on the ship. That type of thing.
And the heat had an ability with how much lift you can get?
That's right. The hotter it is, the less they can lift. As a matter of fact, most of the missions we had in Vietnam, the helicopter was able to carry 1,600 pounds of fuel, which would last you about 4 hours. However, we only loaded them up with about 800 pounds, so we could carry more ammunition or more troops on any mission, and most missions didn't last more than 2 hours anyway. So,
what was the top speed or the normal speed?
No, slow, 90 to 100 knots loaded. Okay. That was it. Yeah, so it was fairly slow.
110 miles an hour or something.
Yeah, exactly. And there was one interesting situation on the DMZ where I was waiting for some troops to come aboard. Now we had 2 or 3 helicopters that were in a row, and we had the ocean on our left, or the South China Sea on our left, and the beach on our right. So we're sitting on the beach, turning. Okay, we're running, and waiting for our troops to run in and load up so we could take them back to the ship. And so I'm looking in my mirror, and I saw puffs behind us. Okay, I couldn't hear anything, but I could see a puff behind us, and there was a puff on the beach, maybe 500-800 yards behind us, and then shortly thereafter, a few seconds after that, there was a puff in the water, a splash in the water. So what it appeared is the North Vietnamese artillery was marching its way down the beach, one right, one left to get to us. So I figured it was time to leave. So we got our troops on board and left. So we were pretty lucky about that. We lost. I think we lost a couple of airplanes or helicopters due to ammunition or hostile fire at that point. But other than that, we didn't lose any people. We may have had some wounded, but we didn't lose anybody in the squadron.
And what was your tour of duty over there? Was it 1 year?
It was, I left, the general tour of duty was 13 months.
Okay.
Yeah. Then once we offloaded the ship, okay, then we offloaded to farther south, 50 miles south of Da Nang, which was outside a air base called Ki Ha, which was right on the beach from Chu Lai. Okay, which was south of Da Nang, and I spent the last 4 or 5 months of my tour in the Chu Lai area, which we did the southern half of the I Corps. I Corps being the Marines section of northern South Vietnam, which we covered.
Was it typical that you would fly every day, or would you fly 4 to 5 days?
Well, pretty much. Depending upon what was necessary, I'd say, I think I flew probably about 400 missions when I was over there. Each mission being a sortie, here a number of sorties on this mission. Maybe if you flew one mission in the morning, another one in the afternoon, that type of thing. And if you took fire when you're on your mission, they give you double mission credit. Okay, so 400 or 500 missions that type of thing. I was an operations duty officer, so when you did that, you were on the desk in the ready room where we got all our information, the maps and calls and that type of thing in our fragmentation orders. So you'd be there for 24 hours. So you usually got that day off. So I didn't fly every day. Every fourth day you were the operations duty officer, so you didn't have to fly every day.
What kind of intelligence or planning did they give you? Was it very detailed, or how would you describe the information you had before you went on missions? You mentioned before sometimes you didn't even know there was a mission until you.
That's right. Yeah. Well, what we would get a fragmentation order, which would tell us approximately how many people we were going to be picking up, and where they were going. Okay, and what they were going to be doing. So if there was going to be, like, say, a recon mission, we'd need, say, 4 helicopters to take 12 people out into the mountains. Because, say, on a normal recon mission, if we were going to drop the Marines out there, we would take probably 3 apiece, because some of the landing zones, areas that we would land in might be 3,000 feet above sea level. Okay, which made landing and lifting a little bit tougher, especially if you're in the summertime, June or July, and it's 95 degrees or 100 degrees. That's one problem. Then you go up 3,000 feet off to the west, and so you took 3 or 4 loaded troops, and it usually took probably a flight of 4. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And how did you navigate? Was it purely on maps?
We had maps. You did visual, and they had a TACAN systems in country out of Chu Lai, Phu Bai, and Da Nang. They also had the TACAN, which was a measuring, tactical measuring, and it gave you the bearing to the site. okay, or from the station rather. You got the bearing from the station, and it also gave you the distance, so distance measuring equipment on the ground and in the helicopter.
Was that like three-point radar or whatever it was, or radio signals where they identify it? It was on the ground, or was it in the aircraft as well?
Well, in the aircraft as well. Yeah. So what you did, you'd say you're going out to An Hoa, which is southwest of Da Nang, and it'll be 27 miles on a bearing of 235. That type of thing. So even if you're on a night medevac, okay, of course you can't see the ground, and there's not a whole lot of lights because there wasn't much there. So you'd fly out to 27 miles and a heading of 235. When you got there, you'd circle the area, call the people on the ground, so you'd pick up a medevac, and say in one instance where we were in the area of An Hoa, we was flying with Bob Boyer. I'll never forget, I was a co-pilot at the time, and we called up the people on the ground, and they said blah blah blah, and we were so-and-so -2. Powerglide was our call sign, so Powerglide Medevac, this is so-and-so on the ground. Say, okay, well, we call them back and say, what's the extent of your injury? And they say gunshot. They say, well, is there any heavy fire in the area? And say, no, it's quiet. Okay, so in the meantime, I say, okay, what do you got? How are we going to find you? I have a Zippo lighter. Okay, so here we are, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's dark as the inside of a cow, and this guy is on the ground, this corporal or whatever he is. He's got a Zippo lighter. He's holding it up, and he's got this thing burning. And we could see it. We'd circle down. Last second, we'd flip on the landing light and pop into the landing zone. That's scary.
Were all of your operations in support of just Marines, or did you ever get involved in joint with the Army?
Not really. No, not really. We did joint operations south of Chulai, and with the ROK Marines, Republic of Korea Marines. Yeah. All right. On the one of the recon missions that we had, there was a reconnaissance team of I think it was about 9 or 10 Marines who were off, probably 30 miles off to the west of us, and we had to take four helicopters out to pick them up. And they were back in the mountains. And so we left. I remember I was flying as a co-pilot at the time with Major Burt McCauley. And I think he was the flight leader. So we were probably the first guys in the zone. So anyway, but these Marines were having problems. They were being chased by Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese. And they were back in the jungle. So they had found an area which was fairly wide that we could land in. And it was the high elephant grass, which is probably 5 or 6 feet high, that type of thing. So we came down, we landed with 2 helicopters, and all of a sudden, a North Vietnamese came out of the tree line to our right. Okay, I'm in the left seat of the helicopter. McCauley was in the right seat, and he sprayed us with machine gun fire. And I told McCauley, I said, I'm hit. Okay. And I leaned over and felt my left shin, okay? And of course he thought I was dead because I leaned over the cyclic stick, and so we took off, and I felt my leg. Everything seemed to be all right. So I sat back up and I said, I'm okay. Okay. So what happened was, and then so what we did is we did a couple of passes with all 4 helicopters. Had the machine gun fire, the boys, the crew and the gunners firing out the right-hand door into the tree line. Made a couple of passes there with all the 4 helicopters, because that's all we had was the M60s. And then we were able to go in, land one at a time, while the other helicopters are going by, firing into the tree line, picking up the Marines, one at a time. And then once we got them all, everything was good. Nobody was wounded, no problems. We did take a number of holes in the helicopter. I think there were some, 20 or 30 holes, whatever it was. And interestingly enough, when we got back, I checked my left leg. A round had come in the right side of the helicopter, went through the center console, under and behind my right leg, and hit my left shin, my bootlace. It cut the bootlace on my boot, and I looked on the floor of the helicopter and I found the round. Okay, so of course, and I said, "This is what hit me." It felt like I got hit in the leg with a baseball, basically. Fortunately, I was not wounded, and I was one of the lucky ones that didn't get wounded. And so, of course, I was married at the time. I said, "What am I going to do with this thing?" I said, "Well, what I'll do." My father-in-law, George Freeman, he and I rode back once. He was an old Marine too, by the way, and he was in World War II. And so I said, "Well, what I'll do, I'll take it. I'll write a letter to him. I'll send him back the round." So I sent him back the little round, and so, as a matter of fact, I've still got it. So, but I didn't tell my wife at the time. I didn't tell her that until I got back. Yeah. So.
Interesting. What kind of liberty did you get, or where did you do some R&R? Did you do it in country?
No, no. I was in the town of Kihah once for one day. Okay, we did some shopping. I took a couple of pictures there. We did some shopping. Of course, we were required to carry our piece. We had a 38. We were pilots. The only thing we carried was a 38 pistol anyway. R&R, I went to Malaysia for 4 or 5 days, and that was it basically. But of course, we had 6 weeks in Okinawa when we did pilot training, that type of thing. So I guess you'd consider that kind of an R&R also. But as far as in-country Vietnam, that was it. I didn't really want to go anywhere there. I just didn't want to take any chances.
Any interface with the Vietnamese people themselves on base?
Yeah, the only, well, we had, they had people come on the base and did laundry, okay? So we had a Nason that would come in, or Mama-san, whatever they called the lady, and there were a number of them that would do 3 or 4 hooches. We might be four pilots in a hooch being a corrugated metal building with screens on the side and a corrugated metal roof. And we had screen doors on it, and that was basically, of course we had no heat, but we did have electricity. So they would come in and they'd do our laundry for us. And that was basically it. They did some cleanup and that type of thing. And while I was there, we never really had any problems with anybody overrunning the base, that type of thing. I know I had heard one story that the squadron, one of the admin people in the squadron was sitting there prior to me getting there, and they had some people, cross the wires and come in the back door of the admin office of the squadron, and of course one of the guys was there. He had his weapon and did a little infighting with them. But I fortunately wasn't able to. Didn't see any of that. I was lucky.
So you're there from July of '67.
July of '66 to August of '67.
August of '67.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
What kind of news were you hearing from the home front at that time? What kind of access did you have to what was going on at home?
Well, we heard the news about the, all the objections and the objectors, that type of thing. And when I went home in August, we had to stop over in Okinawa for a day or two, processed through Okinawa. And interestingly enough, I got friendly with a chief warrant officer who had joined the Marine Corps. Now, this is 1967. He had joined the Marine Corps the year I was born. Okay, so we had a good night together, the two of us, and we flew back on a C-141. It wasn't commercial, but it was a C-141 Air Force, and he and I were the two senior people on board, and came back into San Francisco, and then we transitioned from there. But I was concerned going to the airport, commercial in San Francisco, and I was also concerned when I got off the airport in Newark about what kind of greeting I would get from the populace. Okay, but fortunately there were no objectors there. I really didn't have any problem. And when I was there, I was in uniform, full uniform, and one fellow came up to me and he said, "Hey, Marine, where were you? I told him I just got back from Vietnam. I just called my wife, and they're on my way to on a way to pick me up. And he said, "Oh, you want to have a drink?" He was a World War II bomber pilot. So naturally, we had a couple of pops at the bar on the way. So that was a good homecoming for me. And I did come home to New Jersey at that point, because my wife had moved here while I was gone.
Before we go back to what you did after you got out, could you explain what these medals are?
Oh, sure. Of course, I wasn't made a major until I was a captain when I came home from Vietnam. A number of us were promoted while we were there as captain. So I was a major when I retired from the reserves. But these outside medals is Vietnamese service, and these were given to me by the state of New Jersey. And the green and white, that's Vietnam service, the Vietnam campaign, and the red and yellow is the National Defense ribbon with the silver plate inside is it's called the Sikorsky S. And when someone flying a Sikorsky helicopter makes a rescue, the Sikorsky company sends you a certificate and a pin as an emblem that you, and as an award rather, that you made a rescue, you saved some people, and used their helicopters to do so. Okay? And then the other one, the blue and orange, that's the Air Medal, and that has a number 19 on it. So every 20 missions, we earned one Air Medal. So 20 times 19, so I got credit for, I guess, 380 missions. And then, of course, the Geneva Convention card, which was given to us, and that we would show if we were captured, and I'm sure the Vietnamese didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that.
I could read it.
Right, and then of course the shooting badges that I got when we were training in back in the States.
What was your active duty commitment when you started in the Marine Corps, when you graduated from college?
Oh.
How long did you serve on active duty after you came back from Vietnam?
Oh, after I came back from Vietnam, probably it was, August of '67, and I was discharged from active duty in February of 1969. So it was about a year and a half. Okay. I had some thoughts of staying in the Marine Corps, but I found out that I was scheduled to go back to Vietnam maybe 6 months after that, so I decided against it. And so I got orders directly to the reserves, and that's when, 1969, I went to law school. Okay. Yeah.
And at that time, had you relocated to this area?
Yes. Yeah. 1969, I came back, and my wife and I settled in Westwood.
Okay. Yeah. And where did you go to law school?
Seton Hall University in Newark.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And after that, you set up practice locally?
That's correct, yeah. My father-in-law was an attorney in Westwood, and he said, look, I know you're thinking about maybe staying in the Marine Corps or possibly going into the commercial airlines. He said, but if you want to try law school, he said, maybe come out and work with me if you like. So I took the test for law school, passed that, and started law school. And I said, it doesn't seem like a bad deal. So I passed the bar, finished law school, and passed the bar in 1972, and I've been an attorney ever since, active.
And you stayed in the Marine Corps Reserve after you got?
Yes, I did. I got orders directly to Floyd Bennett Field in New York, where we were flying the old H-34 again. And from there, the squadron moved to Lakehurst. We flew the CH-46. And then from there, we were sent to Naval Air Station, Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, where we transitioned into the big Sea Stallion, the Sikorsky Sea Stallion CH-53, which they're still using now, as a matter of fact. So in December of '75, a number of us made the rank of major and were canned, basically, given our walking papers by the Marine Corps. And I did 9.5 years voluntary reserves, inactive reserves after that, and I was able to get my 20-year papers in 1986. So now I'm I can, Uncle Sam is paying for my health insurance. And,
As well he should.
yes.
As well he should. And family, obviously you were married while you were in, you came home and you raised a family?
Right, that's correct.
Any children?
I have 3 boys. Randall, who is 43, he lives in Basking Ridge with his daughters Shelby and Sabrina. Ryan, number 2, was born in '75. He's living in Knoxville, Tennessee with his wife Jill and his boy Alex, who is named after me. My first name is Alexander. Now my 3rd son, Brett, is in Greenville, South Carolina. And I have another grandchild, Benjamin, by my son Randall's first wife, Candace, who is also an attorney in New Jersey. And he's 13 and living in Wayne with his mom. And my wife, of course, Mary Jane, is with me. We now live in Ringwood, New Jersey. My office is still in Westwood.
Could you sum up your experience? How it changed your life serving in the Marine Corps and going to Vietnam? Could you give us anything that you took out of that, and also any recommendations you would make to young people about service in the military?
Well, I'd say the training is fantastic. It's very difficult to go through the Marine training, and I'm sure the enlisted training at Parris Island is a little bit rougher than what we had to go through. We thought it was pretty rough at the time, and the experience I had with the people that I've met, the Marines I've met, and their families are an exceptional group of people, and it taught me that if I put my mind to it, I could do, my body and my mind would pretty much do anything I wanted it to, especially when I was 25, 26 years old, and you could go all day and all night if they asked you to, and you were able to do so. And I think I still feel like that. I still swim. I live on the lake up in Ringwood. I snowboard once in a while with my grandson, and people look at me and say, "You snowboard at your age?" I say, "Well, hey, I feel I can do it, so I do it." And so far, I've been pretty lucky, and I'm healthy. And the Marine Corps has given me, I think, that ability and confidence to do pretty much what I want to do, and what I'm able to do.
That's great. Well, thank you for your service, and thank you for taking the time to share it with us today.
Thank you for your help. Appreciate it.